Dog. Miss Alana Wheeler, Director of the Counter Trafficking Unit. Good morning to you, ma'am.
Morning. Morning to Garth and Natasha, and morning to all the listeners and the viewers.
Thank you so much for joining us
Morning.
and giving us a bit of your time here this morning. There's a question on Facebook I'll throw in a while. Alison, hold on. Miss Wheeler, so you all are at it again. Tell us about the unit and the hard work that you all have been doing and bring us up to speed, please.
Well, firstly, I wanted to really commend again the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Commissioner of Police, the current Commissioner of Police and previous Commissioners of Police. They have always been fully supportive of the work of the unit and providing us with the policing resources that we require to do this very hard work. I would have liked Superintendent Vernie to really speak about the accomplishments of the police because this last case that we got was one of several cases, several success stories from the Special Investigation Task Force. They are a special team of officers. As we speak, they are on the ground working diligently on another matter. And they have done some human service with respect to the fight against human trafficking, and they have really been supporting the counter-trafficking unit. That team was specially set up by the Commissioner of Police to support the human trafficking investigations. Because as you know, no one unit or one agency can do this. And the counter-trafficking unit, we are a very small team, and we rely very heavily on the expertise and the strength and the numbers of other agencies and other partners. And Superintendent Vernie could have mentioned some of the other policing units with whom we work. But especially I would like to mention those operational teams in the TTPS, the MOPS, the Interagency Task Force, and the Garden Emergency Branch. The CSI also, they have provided some very strong support operationally to the work of the unit. And of course, for the Commissioner of Police, Acting Commissioner McDonald Jacob, he has really continues to extend the support to the work of the unit. So we can't do it alone. One thing that the superintendent mentioned also was with respect to the victims and the importance of separating the children from the women and from the men and the importance of the care for the victims. And Maria also mentioned it in her testimony and in her sharing. You know, where Maria, some things that, stood out for me really is Maria said, she was praying and asking God to save her and to rescue her from the situation, and the others also. And she thanked God for hearing her prayer and answering her prayer. And, that is so important, that divine intervention in these matters is critical in really rescuing and delivering victims from these situations. We rely heavily, as I said, on many other agencies. There are international agencies that give us the support that we need for the victims and the victim care. There are churches and faith-based organizations and NGOs that assist us with the shelter and the care of the victims. It is very costly to care for even one victim. And therefore, you can imagine having 26 or 27. And this is just from one case. We have had previous cases where you have had like 45 persons rescued. So sometimes you get them in very large numbers. And you still have to mete out all this care to ensure that the rights of the individuals are protected. So, again, I really want to extend thanks to all those agencies that have worked with us. The Ministry of Social Development has really given us some support with respect to the care of the victims. So just to go into some of the work that the counter-trafficking unit has been doing, over the past year, we've conducted several sensitization and training sessions with different agencies. And I want to go as far back as to around April of last year. You would have seen at the end of the Maria testimony where we spoke about a rescue that took place and some charges that were preferred against persons in the Diego Martin area involving a child victim. In June of last year, the counter-trafficking unit in Trinidad and Tobago was commended by Interpol. And Interpol is the international policing agency that many police services all over the world are members of that organization. We were commended for responding to an Interpol Blue Notice. And an Interpol Blue Notice is where a notice is sent out to all the countries all over the world looking for a particular individual. right, or identifying a particular case that needs to be addressed if it's in your country, if those persons are in your country. And the police officers were able to successfully locate those individuals, and out of locating those suspects, and these were suspects who were part of an international human trafficking ring. Those suspects were located, and out of locating those suspects, we were able to rescue 9 Venezuelan women from that particular case, and that happened around the month of June of last year, and subsequently persons were charged. And the persons who were charged in that matter were Venezuelan nationals, and we also had Trinidad nationals. Maria mentioned in her testimony of someone recruiting her via Facebook. And what we have found in many of the cases involving the South American or even victims generally from other countries, most victims are recruited by their own nationals, persons of their own nationality, and persons from their own culture and their own community. Victims are rarely recruited in our cases by strangers. It's always someone who you know or a friend of a friend of a friend. And so we have Venezuelan nationals who are recruiting Venezuelans in their own country, and they are arranging for them to come across to Trinidad, linking up with the organized criminal groups operating between Trinidad and Venezuela and in Trinidad and Tobago. And we found that even here in Trinidad and Tobago, the exploitation is being done by their own nationals in addition to local persons. So you find it is a very complex web of organized criminal persons who are involved in this crime. So I just wanted to highlight that from the policing perspective, that the officers really continue to do very, very hard work. They are working against the tide because sometimes they work with resources that, they require more resources. They're working in the COVID situation where they also have to consider their own health and well-being, and even that of their relatives, because sometimes you have officers whose relatives are in quarantine and whose relatives have passed away because of COVID, and still these officers come out and they do the work that they're required to do or that we expect of them as a country. So also in addition to some of the sessions we've done, we have done some work with the university students, the undergrad students. Last year we did some of the social work undergrad students and sensitizing them to trafficking. We've done some police officers at the police academy in partnership with the IOM. We had a human trafficking awareness week last year in recognition of the United Nations World Day against trafficking in persons. And during that week, which was the last week in July, we reached out to the Spanish-speaking migrant community, and we had a bilingual session with them. We also had the Ministry of Labor come on board and speak about the labor rights of migrant workers. And Garth, this would have been on your program. We launched the Maria testimony, which you would have heard earlier today. And we did a session on online grooming and sexual exploitation with parents and teachers and even young persons. And that alone is a whole session by itself. We also did some work with the UE Institute for Gender Development, where they did a session. And of course, we had the spoken word competition in partnership with Dependency and the Civilian Conservation Corps. So there was a lot of sensitization taking place last year. With the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force and the Global Financial Action Task Force, we did a presentation to them, and these are global financial experts, global financial analysts. We spoke to them and shared a case study with them on a human trafficking case in Trinidad and Tobago. And, we were recognized by these two bodies. As you know, these two bodies deal with anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. And these are the experts that would look for all the financial crimes committed in offenses. And we had the opportunity to present one of our case studies in those two forums on 2 occasions last year. We've also reached out to members of the intelligence community. We've done some things on redefining masculinities, and the list goes on and on and on with respect to some of the outreach that we have done. What I would say at the last couple of months we've been working on is we have been targeting the frontline officers in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and also in the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. They are the first responders that would possibly interact with a victim of trafficking. And we have been training or sensitizing them on how to screen or what kinds of questions to ask a migrant or a potential victim when they come into contact with them. Those sessions have been going really well. They have been eye-opening for these frontline officers, and we continue to do that work. The latter part of last year, we also did some training with shelters, some of the shelter staff and the managers of children's homes, because as you know, child victims, oftentimes they stay at children's homes and at these shelters, and we've done some work with the NGOs and faith-based organizations to sensitize them when they have to render care and assistance to victims of trafficking. For persons who are Newsday readers, we have been publishing some articles in the Monday Newsday from about the middle of November, and we just have a couple more articles to go. We thank the Newsday, Trinidad Newsday, for giving us these articles free of charge, where we are able to educate the members of the public and, give them a sense of what goes on, what's a typical day at the counter-trafficking unit. So many times we look on the outside and we look in and we assume that certain things are happening or not happening, and there is a lot of work. There are many, many moving parts when it comes to responding to human trafficking. There is the investigation, there is the victim care, there is the international element, there is the embassy element. There are medical issues to treat with. Many victims have many medical issues, in addition to the trafficking issues that they have to deal with. And there are so many, many moving parts when we have a trafficking case to deal with. And so, we just wanted to really make the public aware of this, that it's not as easy a fix as it seems to be, because trafficking is a very complex crime, and trafficking is a crime that involves so many different persons, right? So many different persons and so many different players are involved in trafficking. And for the state to respond to it, it requires all of these necessary resources. So I'll pause on that note and start back to you, Garth and Natasha.
Yes, I mean a lot of information there, and you answered some of the questions that were posed on Facebook. But one thing that we want you to elaborate on a little bit is the Trafficking in Persons report from the U.S. State Department and Trinidad and Tobago's position on that, and the fact that we have not been able to secure any convictions, although all of the work has gone into making the arrest, rescuing the victims, and supervising their care. Why are we unable to convict?
Right. Okay. Well, the Trafficking in Persons report, as you know, is an annual report that is published by the United States Department of State. It is published every June, and they rank countries according to how we are responding in the United States Trafficking Victims and Protection Act of 2000. We are ranked Tier 1 is the highest rank. Then you have Tier 2, then Tier 2 watch list, and then Tier 3, which is blacklist. For 4 consecutive years, Trinidad and Tobago has been at Tier 2. Last year, we were downgraded to Tier 2 watch list. That means that, we need to sort of step up our game, basically, because if we remain at Tier 2 watch list this year, it means that there may be an automatic downgrade to Tier 3, which is a blacklist, which is you don't want to be at blacklist, right, for anything in any country. So we continue to do work. We work very closely with the U.S. Embassy here in Port of Spain. We have some very good partners there, and National Security Ministry, we have a very good relationship with them. And so we've been working with them to really see how we can improve. As I said, this is an effort for not one agency. It's a national effort across the board. And the TIP report really measures the government agency's response. So while you have a lot of international organizations doing very good work, NGOs doing very good work, churches, faith-based organizations doing very good work, the report and the U.S. in that report assesses government agencies' response. So they are looking at what we as government workers, as public officers, are doing in responding to human trafficking. Based on their analysis, it isn't so much how serious the problem is in Trinidad, but it's really what is the country doing to respond adequately to the problem. The kind of resources we're putting into it, the kind of investigations, how aggressively are we pursuing investigations, what sort of protection are we giving to victims. They measure us on the type of awareness raising and trainings that we do with the stakeholders, and also on the kind of partnerships we have. And I mean, we have lots of partnerships in Trinidad. I think the main area really is the prosecutions and gaining convictions. Superintendent Vernick would have explained how the convictions work. The police do very diligent work, very hard work. They take the matters to court. One of the things we have found is that many of the trafficking persons who are charged, they end up getting bail. When they get bail, they tend to go back to their trafficking practices. So, the police has no control over that, neither do we. We charge them, we bring them before the courts, and it is up to the courts and the judiciary to make a determination. Because many times, trafficking suspects can be flight risks, right? Because remember, this is an international crime.
Correct.
And there is crossing of borders that is taking place, whether legally or illegally. So when you give someone bail, you put them back out there to continue plying their trade.
Yep.
Right? That's a whole nother debate by itself. But these are some of the challenges that we have found bringing the persons to court. So you bring them to court, you charge them again, they again get bail again.
Ms. Wheeler?
So we have no control over that. And then, of course, the court system, we rely heavily on the court system to really bring the matters from magistrate court to high court.
Now, Ms.
So
Wheeler,
far, we have 7 matters committed to stand trial in the high court.
now, Ms. Wheeler, can recommendations be made because we know here at Dependency, you know how serious getting to tier 1 is. Can recommendations be made to the judiciary that a special court be set up for trafficking cases alone, human trafficking cases alone?
Yes, I know that we have the Ministry of National Security, I know, has been in discussions with them with respect to that, and those recommendations were made. And so it's really a matter, again, as I said, the separation of state and the judiciary. It's really up to the judiciary to make that decision as to how they will respond best, to treat with this crime. And the convictions, as I said, we have 7 matters waiting to stand trial. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has also been engaged to see how what we can do at the state level to really expedite and push these matters even further, to get some attention in the High Court, really.
Maybe we need to look as well at amending the legislation to make the human trafficking offenses non-bailable offenses.
Yes, and that is also being looked at by the Office of the Attorney General. In fact, we have compiled draft recommendations. The Office of the Attorney General has been working closely with National Security to draft recommendations. So we do have a draft bill. Yeah. And that will be taken to through the regular processes at the appropriate time.
Right.
Ms. Wheeler, this is something that I think we need to always keep on the front burner. People get uncomfortable when you call out their institution, but we here on Independency still insist that. You're talking about seven matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
You refer to 7 matters. Going back, how far we talking about here?
These would have been cases with persons charged from 2013 when the legislation was proclaimed.
2013.
Wow.
Now
so,
tell me.
7 years.
And you see, this is the thing about court matters. You expect victims, especially, to remember every detail of 7, 8 years later.
Yeah.
And also the other challenge also is a lot of victims would have moved on with their lives.
Yeah, there you go.
Especially if they live in other countries. The challenge with when they go back to their country, if you try to reach out to them 7 or 8 years later, you may not be able to find them.
Of course.
So that's the challenges. And then they may have moved on with their lives. Some of them may get married, have children. The spouse is not aware of what they had experienced in Trinidad. They don't really want to recount it. There was one case, they didn't even want to hear from us because they have moved on with their lives. So when you wait so long and there's such a large gap, really and truly, someone trying to remember something and rehash a traumatic and extremely traumatic experience 7 to 10 years later is really, really a challenge. So the police really do a lot of work. And we also want to encourage the police to bring matters to the courts and have them tried as quickly as possible. So even the police officers can move on, because sometimes the complainant in the matter may have retired by then.
Right.
He may have moved to another section, may have been promoted to some rank, and has to now go back into his notes to try to remember what happened.
Yes. It's really sad. And again, you could just, you and your unit, and as you say, the law enforcement officers can do your part, but somebody has to take that baton over the line. And the judiciary, we have to continue to plead with them to understand how important this is for country, not for the unit, but it's important for country. And when the tips report goes down, they don't call out the judiciary, they say the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
Correct.
Which is unfortunate.
It is a national problem, and it is a national effort. And I mean, you spoke earlier about the demand for these services, and persons with, this is a whole thing with vice, dealing with persons' vices and money at the end of the day.
Yep.
Human trafficking is about vices and money. It's a profitable business, and when you take away a person's money and their vice, you've interfered with some deep things. So these are some of the other issues, the fundamental issues to really deal with in Trinidad and Tobago, that we have persons who have an appetite and a fetish for having sex with children, and also for going and buying sex, paying for sex and other types of things, and abusing women also in the process, because many victims are subjected to physical abuse, rape, and other types of abuse. So there are persons in our society that we need to deal with as a country. Is this where we want to go as a country, really?
Thank you very much. Shortman, could you put up that seizure by the SIU, please? And we, as we asked Ms. Wheeler to give a final word, we have major news up next in 4 minutes. So, folks, if you're looking on, these are the drugs that the SIU seized over the weekend, which we know are used a lot too in human trafficking operations as well. Ms. Wheeler,
and if I could just share a little bit about this case before Ms. Wheeler wraps up. Police busted a human... where is it? No. Right, $8 million worth of illegal drugs seized in Tri-City, 4 Chinese immigrants arrested. A quantity of cash was also confiscated. The incident took place during an intelligence-led exercise which was conducted in the Northern Division under the supervision of Assistant Commissioner of Police, Central Intelligence Bureau, Dio Saran, on Wednesday, 26 January. During the exercise, a search warrant for firearms and ammunition was executed at the residence located at Olympia Avenue, Millennium Park, Tri-City. During a search of the premises, officers allegedly found and seized 201 glass vials, each labeled ketamine 10% INJ 23 ml for veterinary use only, along with 76 Ziploc packets, each containing a white crystal-like substance resembling the dangerous drug ketamine. The officers also found and seized 33,775 TT currency in polymer notes, 865 yen, and 53 TT currency notes, and apparatus. Ketamine is a medication that doctors use as an anesthetic to induce loss of consciousness. Effects include sedation and reduced sensation of pain. Police believe that with this seizure, an additional inroads have been made into the human trafficking ring operating in Trinidad and Tobago, as drugs of this nature are used to prey on unsuspecting victims.
Your final words for Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Wheeler. Thank you, Natasha.
Well, thanks to I-95.5 for continuing to air these concerns on radio, and just to ask and appeal to persons in our country to please pray for our nation and pray against persons who continue to facilitate the crime of human trafficking, that our country would really be delivered from these things. This heinous crime, it is a terrible, heinous crime against the rights of an individual. And we should not have it in our country.
Maybe you should start naming and shaming people, Ms. Wheeler. What about that?
Yes.
Well, with the consent of the police, certainly.
Yes. Ms. Wheeler, thank you very much. God bless you all. God bless the Protective Service of Trinidad and Tobago, especially those in the front line fighting against this dangerous international criminal activity called human trafficking. God bless you all. Take care.
Thank
We'll
you
keep
so
in
much.
touch. Thank you so much for your time. All right, folks. So